If God is real, and if he truly loves us, then why is he so silent? Why doesn't he just prove himself? This is Faith Explained, where biblical truth comes to light through reason, evidence, and spiritual clarity.
If God is real, then why doesn't he just prove it to everyone, right now? Why not appear in the sky, speak audibly, or perform a miracle in every city at once? Wouldn't that end all the doubt? It's a fair question, and the answer may surprise you. It can be deeply frustrating, especially when we're suffering or searching, and the heavens feel completely silent. We're told that God is loving, personal, and present. But often, it doesn't feel that way. And so we ask, if he really exists, why is he so hidden? But what if the silence is not the absence of God? What if it's part of the answer? Let's start by asking, what kind of proof are we actually demanding? Would a miracle convince you? Some people watched Jesus raise the dead and still didn't believe. Are we looking for certainty that removes all doubt? Or are we seeking something deeper? There's a dangerous assumption here, that if God is real, we'd be absolutely certain, no questions left. But that's not how belief works in most areas of life. We trust in love, in justice, in human dignity, in historical truths we've never seen, not because we have mathematical certainty, but because the evidence makes faith reasonable. We believe in the reality of ancient history, the character of those we love, the dignity of the human person, not because it can be proven in a lab, but because we've seen enough to trust what we cannot fully grasp. C.S. Lewis put it brilliantly. If there was a controlling power outside the universe, it could not show itself to us as one of the facts inside the universe. No more than the architect of a house could actually be a wall or a staircase or a fireplace in that house. God isn't just another thing inside nature. He's the reason nature exists. So we shouldn't expect him to show up like gravity or sound waves. Now some will say, I just don't believe anything without proof. But here's the problem. That kind of radical skepticism, taken seriously, leads nowhere. We can't even prove our memories, our thoughts, or the existence of the external world with absolute certainty. If you say, I won't believe in God unless I have perfect proof, but you trust your senses, logic, relationships, and moral convictions without it, then your standard is inconsistent. And often, that inconsistency reveals something deeper. Not that there's no evidence for God, but that we may not want to believe, even if there is. In truth, I need proof often hides something else. I need control. But God is not a science project. He's not a lab experiment that submits to our demands. He's a person. And persons reveal themselves differently than things. But for many, it's not philosophy. It's personal. They've prayed, pleaded, waited, cried out, and heard nothing. And that ache, that silence, can feel unbearable. Doesn't that silence prove God isn't there? It's an understandable reaction, but it rests on a dangerous assumption that God, if he's real, must always answer how and when we expect. But that would make us God, not him. If he's truly sovereign, then unanswered prayers may not mean abandonment. They may mean he's doing something deeper than we can yet see. We want God to be obvious. But what if he's after something greater than just belief? What if he's after the formation of our soul? This isn't a modern frustration. Even in Scripture, those who once heard God loud and clear often found themselves later in the dark. Take Job. He lost everything, and God says nothing. And yet, Job declares, though he slay me, yet will I trust him. David cried out, how long, O Lord, will you forget me forever? Yet he still sang, but I trust in your unfailing love. Abraham waited 25 years to see God's promise fulfilled. Between the Old and New Testaments, There were 400 years of prophetic silence, no new scripture, no clear voice, yet Israel waited. Even Jesus on the cross cried, my God, why have you forsaken me?" God's silence is not always his absence. Sometimes it's preparation. Sometimes it's the test that matures trust into something unshakable. And sometimes silence is how he invites us to seek him with all our hearts, not with shallow expectation, but with burning desire. Let's go further. What about those in Scripture who never heard from God directly, yet still believed? The Roman Centurion had no covenant and no visions. And yet he said, "Just say the word, and my servant will be healed." Jesus marveled and said, "I haven't found faith like this anywhere in Israel." Or the Canaanite woman, dismissed, ignored, even insulted, and still she persisted. Even the dogs eat the crumbs from their master's table. Jesus said, "Woman, you have great faith." The woman at the well had no signs, no proof, just one conversation. And she believed enough to run into town and say, "Could this be the Christ?" The bleeding woman in the crowd, the criminal on the cross, the widow who gave 2 coins. None had visions, none saw God's face, but all believed. Hebrews 11 describes men and women who never saw the promise fulfilled. It says, "These were all commended for their faith, yet none of them received what had been promised." And Jesus, speaking to Thomas, said, "Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed." That's us. So why does God stay hidden? If he wants us to believe, why doesn't he make himself impossible to ignore? C.S. Lewis tackled this in the Screw Tape Letters. Imagining demons discussing God's strategy, he writes, "You must have often wondered why God does not make more use of his power to be sensibly present. But you now see that the irresistible and the indisputable are the 2 weapons which the very nature of his scheme forbids him to use. He cannot ravish, he can only woo." God's goal is love, not coercion. Faith is the space where freedom and love are possible, where relationship is chosen, not forced. Lewis continues, "Our cause is never more in danger than when a human looks around upon a universe from which every trace of God seems to have vanished and still obeys. This is the power of hiddenness. It's not cruel, it's formative. It's the Father letting go of the bicycle seat. Not because he's gone, but because he's teaching us to ride. Silence forces us to walk by faith, not by sight. And in that walking, something beautiful happens. We become strong, not just strong in belief, but strong in love, strong in perseverance, strong in character. God could part the sky. He could appear to every person and remove all doubt. But then there would be no trust, no freedom, no love, just compliance. And that's not what he's after. He whispers. He reveals just enough for the willing and just little enough to leave room for faith. He allows the seeker to seek, the questioner to ask, the heart to wrestle. He hides not to be absent, but to draw us closer. He remains quiet, not to punish, but to awaken deeper longing. The heavens declare the glory of God, but only the humble will hear the declaration. So if you've been asking why God doesn't prove himself to you, maybe he already has, just not in the way you expected. He doesn't shout over your shoulder. He whispers into your soul. And in the stillness, in the waiting, in the shadows, he speaks.
If this helped you get more clarity and inspired you, make sure to like, subscribe, comment, and share this with someone you care about.